From Oireachtas, Éamon Ó Cuív.
Yeah, so obviously question 9 is linked to the issue raised in question 10. So this asks the question, the number of farmers with less than 10 suckler cows in the SCEP scheme and the percentage of such farmers estimated, in other words, the number of farmers that we have in total with less than 10 suckler cows and the percentage of those that are in the SCEP scheme. And I think that when you look at that figure, you're going to see that the scheme is not attractive to smaller farmers.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Cuív. The objective of the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme, or the SCEP, is to provide support to suckler and beef farmers to improve environmental sustainability of the national beef herd. The programme is aiming to build on the gains delivered already through the Beef Data Genomics Programme, which just finished there in December, and also the Beef Environmental Efficiency Programme through improving the genetic merit of the herd. I'm confident that we will see the SCEP drive for further improvements in what is already a world-class suckler and beef herd. At the moment, there is 3,500 participants, 3,513 participants in SCEP who have reference animals of 10 or less, and that equates to 16.9% of the total applicants that applied for SCEP. I think there is a challenge there for some smaller herds in particular, Deputy Cuív, because they tend to be cases where they're not dependent and not full-time, when there's less than 10, and often there's an off-farm income involved as well, where you have a suckler herd of less than 10, and therefore take up of schemes, not just in relation to the SCEP, but in relation to some other schemes, can be sometimes less for a small holding like that than it is for a larger holding that is more dependent on that income. But it's open to everyone. The terms and conditions are the same, but sometimes it's not as attractive to those who have lesser numbers, to those that might have higher than 10, 20 or 30.
Minister, 56% of farmers, that's over half of them, have less than 10 suckler cows. That's 44,292 farmers. As you said, 3,513 applied for the scheme. That's 8%. So this scheme is failing totally to improve the herds of the smaller farmers. Less than 10% have applied of that cohort of farmers. So they're not doing anything because a deluxe requirement is required, even though very, very few of those will be finishers. When you go over 21 cows, there's 60% participation. So you have to look at the figures and say, why is it 60%? And on the other, it's 8%. And say to yourself, for the small farmers, on condition that they don't finish the cattle, in other words, they don't have them for the last 90 days, why is the Board BIA requirement, not the agricultural requirements, but the Board BIA requirement, quality assured requirement, which doesn't really relate to them because they don't bring the calves to that maturity. Why is that a condition of the scheme? Because it seems to be putting them off, and you're not achieving your objective, i.e. getting farmers to farm at a high standard. They're just ignoring you and they're walking away. And I can tell you from my own experience, very, very few farmers in the Connemara region of my constituency, of course in the good land region in and around the Neil and Cross and in East Galway, the East Galway side, east of the Corrib River. Yes, they're participating, but the small farmers are just walking away. Even though they take part in acres and other schemes, they're walking away on this one.
Thanks, Deputy Cuív. Ara.
Yeah, and listen, I take your point, Deputy Cuív. I think it has always been a challenge to get smaller herds into the suckler schemes. That was the experience in the last one as well. This scheme is much more attractive in terms of payment rates. So last time around, say somebody under 10 cows, the payment that they've been getting was €90 a cow. The payment they're getting this time around is €150. So it's a big, big increase in terms of the funding that we're actually paying farmers who would have less than 10 cows. Though you would find, if you looked at the last scheme, and I don't have the figures here specifically, it was the take-up for those that were less than 10 cows was much smaller percentage than those. And I think a lot of that is related to the fact that to apply for the scheme, whenever you have a smaller number, that your final payment for it is obviously going to be less than if you had a higher number. And also then as well, there's a much higher chance and a much higher likelihood that there'll be off-farm income involved. Whereas if you have a farmer that has 20 or 30 cows and 60 or 70 sheep, or 20, you know, they'd be very, very dependent and may not have, a smaller proportion would have enough farm income and definitely wouldn't be leaving the €150 per cow behind. So listen, we're looking to make it as strong as possible, increasing it from 90 to 150, and it's open to everyone, but certainly it's harder to get those with less than 10 as a percentage to apply.
Would you accept, in the same regions that we're getting really low participation here, that we're getting high participation, for example, in the sheep welfare scheme? So same farmers, different scheme, one with more reasonable conditions for the small operator. And as I said, part of the Board BIA scheme is that it's the last 90 days. So you're forcing them into a scheme that's not, as is presently constituted, relevant to most of these farmers, because they do not produce them or hold them on the last 90 days. So I'd suggest that a condition of the scheme could be that that you sell them as store cattle, so that the finishing would be done to the Board BIA standard. And then you'd have it both ways. You'd have a much bigger participation from the 8% compared to the over 60% for the bigger herds. And not very big herds, from 21 up, you're well up. Even between 11 and 20, it jumps up to 39%. It's still low, but it's a lot higher than 8%. And as I said, you're leaving out over half the herds, and they need the money too, of course. I think that somebody as happens so many schemes now, overprescribed the scheme for the small operator.
Minister, there to conclude, please.
Yeah, and listen, it's not that the scheme or that we're leaving anybody out, Deputy Cuív. It is open to everyone. Everyone can apply. I accept what you're saying, that those that have smaller numbers are not applying in the same percentages that those who have more. But it is open to everyone, and also we've significantly increased the payments from €90 to €150. And listen, the objective here isn't to get it to a situation where everyone is selling to a quality assured farm for the last 90 days. The objective is to have as many farms as possible quality assured, so that throughout an animal's life, its journey is quality assured. Because as we go forward, and as the sustainability ask of consumers across the world and in supermarkets that we're selling to becomes a stronger one, to be able to say that it's only the last 90 days that's quality assured, as opposed to actually the animal's journey that's quality assured, becomes something we have to look at in terms of actually making sure that we have a very strong scheme and a very strong, robust quality assurance system to be able to maximise the price of that animal. But ultimately, it benefits the farmers that produce it whenever you can maximise the price that you're getting for it.
We'll move on now to question